Hey, it's Marthea Pitts, the MSW coach, and I am back for another episode of my podcast, Macro Social Work Your Way. So look, I always tell y'all, I'm always super excited when I have a podcast guest, and today is no exception. So today I have Kendall. Kendall recently worked with me inside of a beta program that I was running, and I'll tell a little bit about that in just a moment. And guess what? She landed a macro social work job. So I asked Kendall, I jumped in her inbox, Kendall, let's do a podcast episode. And without hesitation, she agreed. So I'm always thankful when people are willing to come back to share about their experience of working with me, what their life looked like before, and what it looks like now with their new job. So, hey, Kendall, how are you? How are things?
Hello. I'm doing good. Yeah, doing good. Glad the weather is better here, so feeling
Yeah,
good about that.
I love it. So let me give a little context and then we're going to jump in with the questions. So for those who are listening, earlier, I wanted to say earlier this year, but it was the end of last year. So at the time of this recording is May 2024. I think it was around early December
Yeah.
2023. Okay, it was. I posted on social media because I had been toying with the idea and I was like, I don't know. And then just all of a sudden I was like, I'm gonna post it. So I posted in my social media Instagram stories. If you're not connected with me on Instagram, you should be. That's my home base. That's where I am at least one time every day. And it's the underscore MSW coach. But I posted in my stories randomly one evening. I was like, hey, I'm starting a mentorship community. And the key objective of the mentorship community is to help people gain career clarity and increase their confidence. That's it. And I was like, it's not going to be career coaching, but it's going to be like helping you learn the fundamentals of like what you should have in your career to like really get into alignment. And so Kendall was one of the people who signed up. There was a hardcore crew. It was like five of them who came every Saturday. We met every Saturday on Zoom from 12 noon to 1:30 p.m. And we did it for almost 3 to 4 months. And so everyone came every Saturday, and Kendall was one of those people. And guess what? At the end of the time, Kendall landed a macro social work job. So, Kendall, let's get into all of the details. First, introduce yourself to the people. Tell them who you are as a human and what you do professionally.
Yes. So my name is Kendall. I am originally from the California area, but I'm now living in New England. I am a cat lover, animal lover, but specifically cats. You may see a rogue run behind me at some point. Um, and I have an MSW and an LCSW, and um, I am now working. Should I state where I'm now working? Okay,
Sneak
I'm now
peek,
work
that's what you do. Yeah, you can give them a sneak peek.
a
Okay.
little sneak peek. I am recently started a new position, working with child serving organizations in my state, improve improve the care that they provide.
I love that. Okay, so the fact that you name that you are a cat lover, I'm sure resonates with many people into this because ironically enough, people that follow my work are largely cat parents, like an overwhelming
Interesting.
number. I met one
Interesting.
social work the other month who was a dog mom. And I told her, I was like, you're the first one, I think. But for the most part, everyone has cats. I love it. Okay. And so, and then also there is a large group of social workers who listen to the podcast who live in California. So to hear you shout out your home state, I know they loved that. So let's talk about what your work looks like before working with me. So, how do you describe your direct practice case management jobs? One, so like that's the first part of the question, and I can repeat these later. What were you doing as far as work in the direct practice realm of work? And what was the process looking like for you when it came to looking for macro social work jobs on your own before working with me?
Yeah. I had done a couple of different roles, but I had primarily done like medical social work, working in hospitals, mostly in like pediatric hospitals with children and families that were in the hospital either from, an accident that had led the child to the needing to be hospitalized, or they had like a chronic illness, so they were in the hospital a lot, in and out. Um, I my last job, my previous job, was in the ICU, and so it was very very intense and was very much very rapid paced. Of It was kind of the weirdly balanced of the worst moment in a lot of these people's lives, because primarily it was accidents, or incidences of abuse, that had kind of led to kind of a catastrophic situation. And then it was also incredibly fast paced and very much like in and out, in and out. How fast can we get these people out of here so we can have another bed? I think that the healthcare system dramatically kind of, understandably, but dramatically changed over COVID. And it was very much, there was a lot of, I think, unaddressed like trauma in the staff that had experienced trauma, especially ones that worked in the ICU. And so it was kind of very much like the motto was like disassociate and get through it. Um, and so it was very much very fast paced, kind of an expectation that um, the work might take you longer than your normal work hours. And that was just kind of the status quo. That's what you had to do. And the and it was just very much like there's a set of things that you're doing. You're going in, you're talking to the family about these things. Maybe they bring up something, you communicate with the medical providers. You can, maybe if they're like a longer term, they're staying in the in the hospital for a longer term, you're maybe communicating with schools or other kind of outside agencies, in kind of some cases, DCF if needed, and so security, unfortunately, sometimes. And so it was a lot. It was kind of very adrenaline based, in that you're just kind of like always moving. There's always another kind of person to see. It was very kind of like, okay, what's going to happen today? Like, what, and if it was 4:45 and someone, if a patient requested social work, like you were there no matter how long it took. And so yeah, it was very it was, I would just describe it as very fast paced and very like structured, in the sense of like these are the tasks that you have to complete with every person that you see, and then like maybe they would have some additional ones.
Wow. So to hear you talk about what caught my ear was about all of it did, but to hear about the unaddressed trauma and staff as
Mm-hmm.
a result due to COVID. And of course, it's not because I'm a clinical social worker, but I recently have been diving deep because, my area is workforce development, into issues in the healthcare workforce. And there are national initiatives, like national work flowing down from the federal government around addressing the burnout in healthcare workers,
Mm-hmm.
which how it impacts healthcare systems on like an employer level is patient experience rates are declining because
Mm-hmm.
the healthcare worker workforce is experiencing high rates of turnover. Retention is a huge problem. So to hear you identify what the root cause issue is. I was like, look at Kendall and her macro social work bag. I love it. Yes. Yes. Connecting the dots, because for some social workers, when that lens is not developed, they don't really know they don't understand like the bigger implications of what they're seeing. So to
Yeah.
hear you talk about that, I love it, because it's a big connection point to the macro job that you landed. So before we get into all of that though, tell me, because you clearly have that macro lens, because you talked about those connections. Um, what did it look like for you prior to joining the community when it came for looking for macro jobs? Were you actively looking for them? Had you had any roles prior to working to me? Give us all of the details on that.
Yeah. So I'll say this was a huge kind of growth for me in the sense of and learning lesson in the sense of I even in my MSW program when I was in the program I was in, I know they're all kind of different. The program I was in was very, very, very clinically focused. Like even the few classes we did have that were macro oriented, were like, here's how macro applies to your direct practice. And in turn, I think I was kind of naive going into the program, and in turn, a lot of the people, the fellow students were students that were like, I want to be a therapist, and that's a totally necessary and needed career. But I never felt that strongly about it. I kind of went into the degree kind of, I know this will give me something, and it will help me, kind of figure out what it is I want to do. And I liked how broad it was. And so I really struggled, like looking back, hindsight's 2020, but looking back, I really struggled in terms of um I never felt like uh got in with the other students because I was like, I feel like I have a different perspective from other people. I remember I have this clear memory of, and this is kind of going on a tangent, but I have this clear memory of going to a class, and I had like a sweater on, that it was from a local congressperson that said like policy is my love language. Um, and I just thought I loved that congressperson, and I also just love that saying. I felt like I was like, yeah, uh, we're actions over words. And the amount of people that came up to me on like our, because my classes were 3 hours and we'd get breaks in the middle, and the amount of people that came up to me and were like, I don't get that, like what? No, that absolutely not. Like just like the amount of people, and it was like shocking to me. And at that time I was kind of like, oh, weird. And I think this was a pattern of me that kind of subsisted until I kind of got into this program, was that I just put that out all aside, and I was like, let's just ignore it and just keep going, because this is the path that you said that you wanted, or that you're on, so you might as well. And so I think I was very much like, this is just the path that I am taking, and it doesn't matter how I feel or what I want, which sounds kind of crazy when I say it out loud now, but um, having that internalized message in me. Um, and I went on to jobs that I thought I should be doing, and things that I was really interested in. But the tasks that I was doing were just not right for me. And you kind of called it out, and that I continued to feel like I had that macro perspective, and everyone around me had a very micro perspective. And that perspective is needed for sure. Um, and I think I had the kind of come to Jesus moment of like, um, what what if I like try something different, and that doesn't mean that I'm like a failure or that I am letting people down. it just means that like maybe my mind is oriented in a way and my interests are oriented in a way that is in a different type of job. And so it took a lot, I feel like, to get me to that moment. I think because I was also dealing with a lot of burnout and like moral injury from not deal from pushing it down for several years. I just like pushed it away, and then obviously it always comes up, especially at the least convenient moments. And so I feel like it took me a lot to get to the point, and it was incredibly challenging before getting into the mentorship because I felt like there was a complete like lack of information, and like lack of training around, especially in my program, about these sorts of jobs. And for me, like a lack of confidence around like, because like I had only ever really been around people that like felt really passionate about doing like one-on-one therapy work. I was like, well, that means I'm not good enough, or that means I'm not, that means like I am not a good social worker, or like that I am going to fail in this career because like I don't feel the passion in the same places that they did. And so I feel like it was like incredibly challenging for kind of all of those reasons of this, like not like when I felt the confidence to like look at jobs, I like also didn't know what I was looking for, and I didn't know how to package myself in my experience in a way that would show that it was like a benefit. I think because I also couldn't see it as a benefit in the moment, I was just kind of in a very pessimistic place. And so I feel like it was just, I think a lot of school, because I think that there is, I won't speak for other schools, but I think at the school that I went to was very so heavily clinically focused that it was like in the implication that it was more important than macro work. And I was kind of like, oh, macro work's the fallback. And I feel like I bought into that myth, and then I was like, oh no, I'm living out this myth, as opposed to it just being two different types of work. And they're both equally valid and they're both equally important. It's just like two different orientations to the same problems.
I love that. So I took a lot of notes because I'm a note taker. So I love one that you talked about feeling like an outsider, because that is a recurring theme that I hear from social workers around the world, really, not even just in the US, around always feeling like an outsider. But I love the fact that you talked about the deeper parts of that, where because you were, and these are just my words, going along to get along, like, okay,
Mm-hmm.
everyone is going right. I'm gonna go right. Especially after you talked about the sweater, the policy is my love language. I failed to mention before we hit record, we love a good story time over here. So anytime we're in a story, we love it. So to hear about the reactions that you were getting, and the fact, the clear pushback, it wasn't just like, oh, okay, we all need each other. It was all a big continuum of care. We need to be on every level. It was clear pushback there. And I honestly like to think that it's just from the lack of knowledge that is out there, a lack of information that's out there. So when you're giving someone something new, of course there's going to be pushback. But then to hear about like how it showed up later in your career, where the moral injury you were being subjected to because you were doing work that was not in alignment with what your goal was. That's huge. That was huge. And I don't even have commentary for it because I know that helped someone just then hearing that. Um, hmm. I thank you for sharing that, because I think that's the first time we've ever heard it explained in that way on the podcast episode. So let's talk about, okay, when you clearly realize like it is time for me to move and do what I said I wanted to do with this degree, did you encounter any challenges before working with me, as far as like Well, you talked about not really understanding what the job opportunities look like and how to convey your experience to employers. That's just my way of summing it all up. But
Mhm.
did you experience any other challenges? Like, did you get any interviews? Did you apply and didn't get anything back? What was that looking like for you?
Yeah, I think it took me I started I first started applying to first to like other clinical jobs, more direct service jobs. Again, because I was still like, this is what I'm supposed to be doing. I'm supposed to like this. Um, and then I think it took me about, and I had gone on, I think, the also, I think what's important is the, I think, especially because of the turnover and kind of lack of providers, direct service jobs get back to you a lot quicker. And so, um, I was like hearing back from them, and I had applied to a couple, just kind of that I was like, oh, this is interesting. So I'm just going to do it. This job sounds interesting. Um, and like didn't hear back from those. And so I was like, is this a sign that I need to continue with so I would take the clinical kind of job interviews or ones that were like, there were a couple that I found that were kind of mezzo, that were kind of a mix of both kind of roles that I was like, oh, maybe this is what I could start with. And went on a couple of like interviews and was just not excited, which I think also made me like really upset because I was like, why am I not excited about this thing that I like went into thousands of dollars of debt for? And so I I think it took me like a month of like moping and feeling sorry for myself. And then I actually started to like look at things and be like, okay, like what is it that I'm interested in and like what is even out there? So I just started like um randomly searching and like trying to find things. And then I also on LinkedIn like found people who had similar paths, who had MSWs or something, that had jobs that I or worked for places that I found interesting, and like reached out to them and been like, um what do you do, just to get like a sense of what people kind of like what roles were out there. I will say I feel like it's hard. I think a lot of like my initial approach, I think I did like 5 different people are very receptive, which was nice. I think I did like 5 different calls with people. And I think what I learned, and you talked about this in our mentorship group, was um asking. I think it was really helpful in terms of asking kind of what they do and getting a sense of that. But I think asking how they got to that position um, often made me feel worse because it was like chance, or they knew someone who knew someone. And so it was like, well, like, hello, what about me? And so I feel like that felt like I'm never going to get something because I don't know someone who knows someone, or like, am I going to have that chance? But I think the aspects of the interviews I did, or like conversations I did with people where I like learned about what they did, I feel like helped me start to try to solidify a sense of understanding. But I really wasn't getting anywhere. And I think part of that was like a lack of information, and part of that was like a lack of confidence.
I love that one. Okay. So yeah, you're right. I talk about that a lot. There are lots of people out in the social work world who are like, I have a macro job, but what they don't share is that they most likely knew someone or they fell into it happen like by happenstance. So you are 100% correct. And I never thought about that because something that I learned during the mentorship from other members who has spent what I always told them large amounts of time in the informational interview stage. Like, okay, when are we going to execute? How many people do we need to talk to here? And Kendall is used to my coaching style. So, like, what's happening? And it was never like explained that way why it was clear they were stuck in the
Yeah,
informational interview stage, but now it's connecting for me because they weren't leaving with tangible things. So then it just added to the, like, how do I explain it?
yeah,
The being in the black hole. You left with some helpful information, but how do you apply what you just learned from this? And then it just makes the cycle go over and over and over.
yeah,
Yeah. Okay.
totally.
That makes sense. So you talked about the fact that you were applying to clinical roles and meso level roles. I love that. What made you sign up for the mentorship community? How did you
I think
find out about it? Yeah.
Yeah, I think I found out about it on social media. You know, the algorithm be algorithming, and knew I was looking, and I think the short one-on-one we did, where you kind of like explained more about like what you offered really helped in terms of like getting an understanding of like, okay, what actually is this? And I think I was personally at a point where I had reached out to like so many people that I was just like, what's another person? We'll see. And I had reached a point that I was just kind of like, what do I have to lose? And I'm not getting anywhere um, like by myself or by just like you said, by the like informational interviews weren't like someone wasn't being like, you sound so passionate. I'm gonna give you a job. Like that was never gonna happen. And so I think that's kind of really what pushed me to do it.
I love that. So like, because now we're going to get into what was your experience like inside of the community. So by this point, you learned about it. You're already clear that you clearly need some clarity around like what type of macro work you want to do. You learned what you learned through the informational interviews, but also that confidence was something that you needed
Mm-hmm.
to work on.
Yeah.
So I named that for the listeners because that was the two objectives of the mentorship. I was like, I'm just going to help you. I'm going to use my framework that I've used with social workers. I'm going to help y'all get clarity and we're going to increase your confidence because what I've learned from working with thousands of social workers at this point is that the confidence is low, not because you aren't qualified or capable of doing the work. Your confidence is low because you don't have enough information. And this is for the people who,
Mm-hmm.
are attracted to my content because I don't appeal to everyone. And what I know about us is that we need information. We need
Mm-hmm.
to be well informed to be able to make good decisions. And so when you don't have all of the information, it leaves you in a place of like, I'm not really sure if what I should be doing or if I have the thing to do the thing, right? So I name that for people to say that confidence is not low because you can't do the job. It's just because you don't have all of the information. You don't have a clear understanding. And then, of course, with some other strategies, we work on other things that may be over and beyond just clarity. So, what was your journey like inside of the mentorship community, Kendall?
It was really nice. I wasn't really sure what to expect when I first kind of entered it, but I really appreciated the kind of consistency of it and that you know there was like you said there was like a strong dedicated group of people that came regularly and that also like tied in some like accountability where you know we were kind of always given something to work on throughout the week. And it it was nice to feel like, oh, like I gotta do this, you know, like because I know other people will do it and I know Marthea will call me out on it or like in a nice way. And so like it that I feel like that was a really nice like component of it, and to really understand also the like breadth of experience and different types of things people wanted to do that I had never even kind of considered. I think that was really cool and gave me like a clear kind of picture or like a reality check of like how truly how broad like it can be, and like the different places you can go based on like what you're interested in. And I think also I it made the group kind of uh it being this like group really helped in feeling like I was not alone in it, because I feel like for so long, you know, from my the start from when I'm in my MSW program, like I you know, never really felt like I got like I had the same perspective, or like I was working from the same information as like the other people I was in school with. And so, or and then even in jobs where it felt like, um, you know, we were just like coming from different places, which is, you know, we're always coming from different places, but it felt like the puzzle pieces weren't aligning. And so it felt like nice to feel like I was among people who I was like, finally, like, I feel like I like these people like get it and are also trying to move forward, even if we're moving in different directions.
Yes, I love that. So I want to be clear for everyone. I no longer offer the mentorship community, but what Kendall is talking about is a key component of my full group career coaching program, the Micro to Macro Career Accelerator, around the community piece. Right. I was very intentional with ensuring that we had opportunities to build community, even though I know a lot of my people are introverts because I'm an introvert. Like and introverts find each other. But there is a lot of power in the community part of it. We have had people in all of the programs that I offer achieve some tremendous things that they attempted to do prior to coming inside of the community. And I always say it's the power of community, is the fact that you're sitting in an intentional, dedicated time and space once a week talking about your career. You're listening to other people's things, you're providing feedback to one another, you're even sharing challenges and ways to work through the thing. Because, like what Kendall said, we had some heavy hitters in the mentorship community. We had Kendall with her healthcare background, her extensive knowledge on her respective area. We had someone in the community who had over 20 years of leadership experience, like executive level leadership. We have someone else who's high ranking in their organization around homeless access, houseless, and housing access. Heavy hitters. Then we had another person who, for fun in her free time, wasn't even connected to her paid job. She like leads paid speaking engagements and education seminars for 200 plus people. So it was really a professional development, like sent from the heavens opportunity every Sunday, because they were pouring into each other. I was there to guide the process and get some strategies and techniques, but for the most part, it was that community. So to hear you talk about how beneficial that was, I love it. Because one of the things I always talk about is like with my pivot to macro work, which I didn't call it that at first. I called it, I'm a prevention focused social worker, but it was very lonely. I didn't have anyone to talk to. People didn't know what I was talking about, right? They weren't interested in that. They were interested in being in case management land. And there's nothing wrong with that. But I'm like, I want to prevent the thing. Plus, I was tired of working so hard. That was only my second case management job. I
Mm-hmm.
had enough. Like the fun has left the building. So to hear you talk about the consistency, community, and group accountability, I love that. So let's get into
And I
challenges.
just wanted to, sorry, I just wanted to say quickly, because I think this is really important. And it's something that I really like solidified in the mentorship community, was that like there are so many people that get stuck, and I saw like so many people that get stuck in jobs that are just like, well, this is just the way it is, and I'm miserable and I work too much, but that's just the way it is. And I feel like Marthea really like calling us out whenever we entered that mindset, but also like of like, no, that's not true. Like that's a myth. And like you can leave. And like the world doesn't like, I think, you know, especially the tendency as people who get social work degrees, um, it you thought we want to like help. And so then you're like, I'll just take on more, I'll just take on more. And then when you feel like you want to leave, you feel so much shame because you're like, oh my God, I'm leaving these people that really need help. But it's like you're going on to a role, you know, in the macro world, maybe that is also helping them at like a larger scale. So you're really helping more people. But I think you like we get into this place. I know I got into this place, and I feel like a lot of people did, that you're just like, you just get stuck and then you get miserable. And then you're in this like cycle of just like being miserable about a job just because like that's the way it is, or like that's the way it has to be if you want to do like work that's helping people. And so I feel like the focus of the like mentorship community, um, and I'm sure your other services of like, no, that's incorrect and that's a lie, was incredibly refreshing and like incredibly helpful for me when I was like looking for jobs.
Oh, thank you for naming that. Yes, most definitely. I heard a social worker say in 2021 or 2022 when she found my work that she wanted to leave direct practice work, but felt like a sellout. And I had never heard
Mm-hmm.
anyone say it like that. And then since then, I've heard someone inside of one of the current cohorts. She was like, she sent me this post one time, and she said that she always thought in order to give and to serve others, that meant that she had to sacrifice herself,
Mm-hmm. Yes.
her well-being. And then she like shared this video, or someone was talking about the thing, and they weren't even a social worker, but the comments under the post was the same type of thinking, and how they had never thought that it could be any different. So to hear you talk about that, thank you for saying that. I know that resonates with many people. But yeah, like Kendall said, I will say in a minute, that is a lie. They lied to you. Then you can do other things. Okay, so let's talk about challenges. Now, don't sugarcoat anything, but were there any challenges you had while in the community? Like, did you get stuck anywhere? Tell us about the thing, because let me add this in there. I like to be very clear with people. I am not a do it for you service. I'm
Mm-hmm.
not doing anyone's work. I can teach you the strategies, but you have to do the thing. So talk about like what that looked like for you inside of the community.
Yeah, I'll say the biggest challenge was just that, where it was like, oh, I actually have to do the work, and it is a lot more like deeply rooted in kind of old learned habits and beliefs that like are, you have to like kind of like pull out of the closet and like wipe off, um instead of just pushing them farther into the closet. And so I think that was overall overarching like the hardest, um like the biggest challenge. And I think I like would get stuck when I would get stuck in like shame and fear around just kind of like what happens if I do this and it doesn't work, or like like all of those like unknowns and kind of those old beliefs having their like last, you know, dying grip of like, no, you have like this is the way it has to be, like who do you think you are, almost, um thinking that like you deserve better. And I really resonate with what you shared from that, what the other person shared, is that that was 100% my perspective of like, in order to help people, I have to sacrifice myself. And you know, and I'm still a recovering people pleaser, so I still have those tendencies, but I think um, that was really my perspective. Um, and I think the challenging part was like working through those beliefs and like trusting in myself that like there was something better on the other end, even if I couldn't see it yet. Like even if it wasn't like physically there and there was proof, like it was like letting myself like trust in the possibility. And I think kind of specifically, I remember when we had the conversation around like salary and money, that was really, and kind of discussing not only what makes you like what is a salary that you can live on or survive on versus what is like comfortable, like what would allow you to be comfortable and to enjoy like nice things and enjoy like things that make your life better, whether it's like getting your nails done every week or something. Like what would a salary look like if you could engage in these like activities that keep you kind of thriving, and not just surviving. And I feel like so much of the like social work environment is that kind of like you suffer for the people and you make no money doing it, and that's just the way it is. And you like if you complain about your salary, then you're um like you didn't go into this career to make money is so ridiculous, because like it's just like unfair and teaches people this like mentality that it gets people out of the field and it stops people from coming into the field. And I think there's all these ingrained kind of things around money and um around kind of, for me personally, like thinking about um getting getting more money than just a survival full wage was kind of like not in my mind. And so I think that kind of conversation that we had and work we did was like the most challenging for me.
Oh, that I wasn't expecting that one. Because quite a few other people in the mentorship community talked about that whole discussion around money. But it's a real thing. And to hear your perspective of it from like the professional side where the narrative is, you're here to serve. You're not here to be living in a lap of luxury. But at the same time, what I always say is that you have to be coming from a place of fullness, wholeness in every aspect of your life
Mm-hmm.
before you can give to others. So to hear that that really helped you with like a mindset shift, a reframe around what your work could look like. But I also wanted to talk about where you said the deeply rooted work was the hardest, and you said like the old beliefs and their dying grip. That is a very
Yeah.
real thing. I was thinking the other day about this post that I made several months last year sometime, and it's because I was going through the thing. I call it like you're in the in between.
Mm-hmm.
It's too
Yeah.
far to go back to like
Yeah.
the old way of doing and being, but you're not close enough to see what is next. Like you're in between. It's like, I just want to go back. I want to retreat because I know the thing. And it does take a lot of work. I go through that every day. Like it takes a lot of work not to retreat to the known because something is better is out there. So I love that you talked about that because that is a very real thing. And I too am a recovering people pleaser. I think many social workers are. I think that might
Yeah.
be like you know, what is it? A requirement one-on-one of being a social worker. So I love that you talked about that. So let's talk about your breakthrough. What was your, and before I jump into this question, I want to give a little context to people. In the last 30 days, I would say maybe it was like the 30, 40 days, I gave a challenge to the group. I gave them two different challenges. The first challenge was to find a networking event in your city, well, not more so like a professional event, not networking in a traditional sense that you all know, like where we're just there and we are having a powwow because we're social workers, but find a networking event, an opportunity where you can get amongst the people who do the work that you want to do as a macro social worker. And I gave the caveat that it should not be social work led, heavily influenced. It should not be a whole bunch of social workers there. It needs to be people from this other profession area of work. So that was the first challenge. Kendall, along with everyone else, accepted the challenge. Then I came a week later and was like, we are going to do a 30-day challenge where you are going to create one career goal and you're going to have 3 steps to reach the goal. And I'm very clear about one goal because as social workers, as people who, write case notes for fun, we can create some steps. I was like, you only get 3, not 5, not 6, not 7, only 3. And Kendall took the challenge and ran with it. So first, give the people, before I jump into the question about the breakthrough, because I'm sure you will talk about it while you're explaining it. Tell the people, what was your process for accepting that first challenge of finding a networking event or professional conference type thing to get amongst your people? Like, well, how did you feel about that challenge when I gave it to you? Or did you have any like internal feelings, especially as an introvert?
Yes. I was definitely nervous, um, because yeah, because of people, just in general. And unknown people, I'm like, that's the worst case scenario. Unknown people and small talk, the worst. And so I was definitely nervous about it, but I think I felt like I had been, we had been building skills, and I felt like it was like, okay, let's like we a big thing for me was being able to like learning how to like talk about my experience and my like interests in like kind of a coherent, like very short like way. And so I feel like the like networking event is like a way to really practice that skill. And so I was definitely nervous about it, but like I will be nervous about any social event ever. And so I think I was just kind of like, okay, I think because, I had been on such a roller coaster journey that I was just kind of like, again, kind of like, okay, let's see what happens. And like, might as well like, lean in, um, lean in because I know I don't want to go back.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, so then I came in after you identified the event and we created the 30-day challenge. Can you share what was your breakthrough or moments like things turned around for you where you realized, ah, I'm closer to the other side than I realized? Or yeah, let's focus on that. When did you realize like, okay, I'm closer to getting the macro job that I want than I realized?
I think it was when we like solidified, we had like a day where we solidified my like elevator pitch mission statement. And literally it was, we did that on a Saturday. And literally on like Monday, I applied to 2 jobs based on the elevator pitch. And by our next meeting, I had interviews set up with both of those jobs. Like, had reached out to me and like had interviews set up, and it was like, wow, all right, like this is real. But also like the proof of like after having been applying to like different types of jobs and not really getting much of a response from people. Um, and then very quickly, and it doesn't always happen that way, but like very quickly hearing back from like 2 jobs right after I kind of changed things up and like used what we had like built. It was very like tangible, like you can't ignore this, that this is working, and that like the dying grip was falling. They were falling down the crevice, um, that they were holding onto. It was crumbling. I don't know where this metaphor is going, but uh, yeah, I think that was a huge moment. I think there were kind of smaller moments leading up to that that I feel like were like helpful in the full kind of breakthrough, in the sense of, I think a fundamental like change in perspective for me came when we talked about, first when we talked about like connecting back to like of what we like, our childhood and what we said we wanted to be, and then also like the things we do for fun, um and the tasks, kind of the tasks you like doing versus like the content or the job title. Like it was like, okay, but what are the tasks you actually like doing throughout a day? And I, like, that sounds so simple, but I had not thought about it that way. And so it wasn't just like what will your work be about, but like what will the things that you, are there things that you like to do, and like what then find a job where it's not only like the topic is of interest, but it's like your day-to-day doing things that you find interesting or that you like to
I love that. And I love the metaphor. We're going to stick with that one because
do.
it's a shattering of those old career beliefs where I have to know someone to get a macro job. I need years and years of leadership experience or years and years of experience doing that specific type of macro work. These are the things I've heard out on the social work streets, like all of those things, and even the internal things, right? So I love the metaphor because really, truly, it's a shedding of that way of thinking about your career. And I'm like, look, it doesn't have to be that. It's not that complicated. You can use what you already have, your experience, the degree, the education, all of the things. We don't need to add any more to it. You already are an expert in your own right. So I love to hear that. And just context for the people listening, what Kendall is talking about, where she was answering those questions, is my framework. It's called the 3Ps framework. I created it in my own pivot to macro work. I've used it to land 5 macro jobs. I use it to help dozens, hundreds of social workers get clarity. And you're right, like answering those questions really, truly is the foundational thing that moves you into alignment. And so I just want to say this for people who are like preparing to come inside of my group career coaching program. The hardest part, believe it or not, Kendall, is for people to go through the framework because they are unwilling to shed what they thought they knew was the right way to get a job, where you start by looking at
Mm-hmm.
job boards and you just apply for the first thing there, or asking a question that I hear all the time: how can I use my MSW degree? And I'm like, that's not the question you start with. Is what do you want to do? What do you like
Yeah.
to do? Right? Because it helps you to reclaim your power. It's your career. You're the one that has to go to that job every day or log in every day, not me, not someone else on the social work streets. So you have to start by looking at the things that you want and need, not what can I do with this degree. I cannot stand that question when I see it on social work streets. Like I instantly click off wherever I see it. That is not the question we need to be leading with. But I love to hear you talk about that. Um, so what were your final results? So you talked about you applied 1 week, in the week, you got 2 interviews, you went to the networking event. I love it. So talk about like, what do you do in your macro job? Like, give us the details. What are you doing?
Yes, yeah. So I like had, I'll just share, if, in case this is helpful, but I had like three rounds of interviews with different different members of like the team that I'm now on. And it was actually very my you don't need a license like for the job that I have, but they said that it was kind of like a benefit in the sense of just having that kind of like clinical background and experience, and kind of expertise, kind of, I think, gave me a little bit of a boost, um but it was definitely not necessary. And I think it was also being able to tie tie kind of the clinical experience that I had into like why, like exactly what we were saying in terms of the elevator pitch, but like more expanded than that. Like just like because we had done so much work um around that kind of like what is it you want to do? Like I was kind of like really able to like go into detail on like what it is I was interested in um and why my like experience would be a good fit or would bring kind of like a unique perspective. And so I think that was a really like important way to like learning and way to like then go into the interview. And I think the building of the confidence to the point where um I was kind of like, okay, like you're interviewing with me too. Like, I'm not just like seeking like your approval. Like I'm like, you should be seeking my approval. And so I think that kind of perspective shift and that like built up confidence was definitely a huge, I think probably very much contributed to the success. And so it was kind of perfect timing in the sense that our like mentorship group was ending when I like got the news that I like got the acceptance offer letter, and um, it is more like money than I've made before, and was more than um, what I was like expecting, and so that was definitely nice, and that was definitely like like harken back to our like money conversation. Um, and I right now, I've um, been there for about like a month and a half. And a lot of it so far has been getting onboarding and getting up to speed. But I work, as I mentioned at the beginning of the episode, I work with child serving agencies across the state that I live in, to like improve their how they work with children and families, um, working to ensure that the care they're providing is trauma informed, and addresses kind of the changing needs of a population. If there's a particular like problem that's coming up or kind of social issue, with like for example the rise of COVID and then kids having to go back to school and that kind of gap, pandemic gap, and where that left kids like academically and socially, is like a huge thing. And so modifying the kind of resources we're providing to meet that need. And so a lot of the day to day of what I do is building up like resources, building um, decks like slide decks and other kind of tangible resources that that programs across kind of the state that serve children in different ways can use when they're working with staff, or working with children and families. And another big component, which I am particularly excited about, is we're doing work into like a secondary traumatic stress um, in staff, which I think I experienced. And so I think how to build environments and like human service agencies that are at least somewhat more sustainable than they are already. And, not leaving self-care up to individual staff members, being like, it's important to take care of yourself, but not giving anyone time or compensation to actually take care of themselves or structure. Um, and so that is like part of the work as well, working with different kind of stakeholders. And I would say kind of um, my like clinical background definitely comes into play, not only in the like content of making the resources, but also in the like creation of resources. We did that a lot when I was in direct service in a different way, where I was kind of compiling resources for people. And so it's kind of, I really see it. I'm kind of surprised, even after doing all this work, I'm surprised at how many of the skills were transferable. Where I was kind of like, yeah, it's similar content, it's the same content, but like it will be different skills. But it's really not. it's 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 all the most of the skills are transferable. Um, and you're just like using the skills that you've built in clinical direct practice roles in a different way, which is really exciting to me and really feels like I'm like using my like brain in the way that it should be, or like to the full extent that it is. Yeah,
I love that because that's the thing that usually that is the biggest aha moment for people in the career coaching program around when we are talking about their experience and I'm translating for them as to what that looks like on a local level, but what that looks like on a national or international level, and how you essentially are already doing the work. It's just a reframe. It's you looking at it from from the macro lens and being able to then communicate that to macro employers because yes, Kendall's job infuses clinical side of things also, but for the most part, a large percentage of macro social workers will work in settings where there are no other like clinical social work type people. They are from other fields, industries, and professions. And so, like you said earlier, you have to be able to communicate what you've done to them in a way that's understandable to them. So to hear like your discovery around, I'm I was already doing this thing. I love that because that is the biggest takeaway. But it's the hardest thing to get people to see. And one of the
yeah,
biggest struggles that I have around that is that social workers are so used to giving away all of their things for free
yeah.
that they will come to me and try to attempt to ask me one question in hopes that that is going to be the floodgates to all of their answers and they're going to tell them the thing. And it's like, no, it requires much deeper work. Like, and this is for the listeners. You hear how Kendall said we spend a lot of time on career clarity, confidence in the beginning before you can even get to uncovering what experience you have to get where you want to be. So I say that for the people who are listening, like who are really looking for like a universal response. It's not universal. It's based on your individual wants, needs, and desires. And it does require deeper level work. So to hear you talk about it over and over about how the career clarity work was paramount, like getting clear about what it
Mm-hmm.
is that you wanted to do and what that looks like in other spaces. We couldn't have planned that more better. We didn't even plan it.
No, we didn't.
Like that is the biggest challenge. And I'm really working every day to get social workers who encounter me on social media to shift their frame of thinking from everything's going to be one quick response answer. It's not like in case management land. This is deeper
Mm-hmm.
work. You're going to have to sit in
Yeah.
a space and think about the thing. Um, so I have a few questions. And this is more so for the listeners because these are things that they love to know. Are you remote, hybrid, or in person?
I am hybrid. I'm a 1 day in the office.
Okay. Where would you say your career satisfaction is? Let's first identify like a number on a scale of 1 to 10, one being low, 10 being super high. Before you got this job, how satisfied were you with your career as a whole?
A -10.
Okay, I'm not surprised. Where, and I again, you're still in the first 90 days of your job, but where are you now on a scale of 1 to 10 with this new job?
I think um I'll be like, I think as I'm still like adjusting to it, and learning kind of the potential of where I can kind of go next. Um, I would give it like a 7.5, 8.
I love that. Okay. And I wanted to ask you one other question. Were you, like you mentioned earlier, around you were clear about how an interview is supposed to work. We're interviewing each other. This is not a
Mhm.
one-way street type thing. Were you clear about what you were looking for in an actual organization? I know you had clarity around what you want your career to look like, but coming through the mentorship community, did you have more clarity around what you needed in an organization?
Yeah, that's a great question because that was a huge component that I kind of forgot to mention in terms of I feel like that was also another thing that was I could tell, you tell sometimes with interviewers when you ask a good question, you can kind of see they're like, oh, that was a good question. But they don't quite like say it, but you can just like read their body language. And I feel like I remember by the time that I had gotten to these interviews, I had interviewed for a good number of places. Um, and going through the program too, I was like, at that point was very kind of clear around um what kind of organization I wanted to work for and what I was looking for, and then was kind of ask questions around what kind of things that they had mentioned, kind of like buzzwords that I feel like people often throw out, especially in kind of helping professions, in the sense of like they throw out the word trauma a lot and like trauma informed, and like they threw that out a lot but never defined it. And so I remember in my like second interview, because they had mentioned it a lot in the first interview, I was kind of like, they were like, do you have any questions from the previous interview? And I was like, yeah, what does trauma informed mean to you? Because that would get me a sense of the type of organization that you are. Like, does your definition of trauma informed mean my definition of trauma informed? Um, and if it doesn't, like, is that a deal breaker for me? Like, do I want to work for an organization that has this definition of trauma that maybe I don't agree with? Or is it something that's just like, it's just a slightly different approach and that's fine? And so I feel like I remember I asked that question, and both of the interviewers, it was on Zoom, and both of the interviewers were like, and I could tell that I was like, all right, that was a good question. And so I think, that approach of, it's hard when you're, and I think that's what also comes with information, because it's hard when you don't know what you don't know, and you're kind of like, oh, I don't know what questions to ask, or like, I don't feel like I have anything to contribute to this conversation. Like, it's just about like learning what you have to contribute. And so I feel like getting to a place, or at least like faking it, where you're able to be like, to ask like meaningful questions back from a place where you're like, these questions are based on like what I want out of an organization.
I love that. Yeah. I go on a tangent about being in rooms with leaders, regional, statewide, national leaders, and they're talking about something completely different. Wait a minute, that is not the definition of what we're discussing here.
Yeah.
You better have clarity before you find yourself whipped up into some stuff that you don't morally agree with. I
Yeah.
love that. And I love a good like I love when y'all get those reactions from the interviewers. We love that you answered that question. When they are engaged in what you're talking about, that is a sign that you're on the right track. I love that. So we're gonna wrap up shortly, but I just want to also clarify. Well, I want to emphasize the fact that Kendall didn't just take any job. The job
Mm-mm.
that she has aligns with what she identified her work, what she wanted her work to look like in the whole clarity work that we did with the framework to the T. Like, it's all of the elements, right? And what I teach my career coaching clients is that you're not going to always go into a ready-made position where the title is like XYZ, child advocate leader. I'm just making up some things, right? It's not going to be that. Your role as a macro social worker is to enter into the space and bring education around what your population may need or different approaches to the work. That's why you're there. And so I think it's important, well, I know it's important for people to understand that when looking for macro jobs, that your role is to come in and educate about your population or area of interest, because they may not be aware that that is an area of need. And so, but you still have to have the foundational understanding of what you want your work to look like, what type of organization you want to be attached to. And then you come in and educate the masses around, hey, did you ever think about this population as well? They are a group that needs attention around this topic as well. So I just wanted to name that without going into
Yeah.
full detail as to why. But Kendall is in the job that she wanted. It wasn't, she just took whatever floated by on the computer screen. So Kendall, let's wrap up. Give the people one tip, one piece of
Ooh,
advice, one thing to know, whatever you want to leave with them, leave them with one gem.
one gem. That's so hard. I think um the one gem is to think about the things that you take the hat off of what you've, and I feel like it's because it's what you did, but like take the hat off of the things that you did before, and when you're thinking about what you want to do next, like in terms of, you're like, oh, for me, I was like, oh, I've been in healthcare for most of my career so far, so like I can find a macro job but like in healthcare, as opposed to like trying to take all that stuff away as best as you can. And for me, I'm a physical writer down, and so like, or maybe you just think about this, or you put it in your notes app or something, of like the things that you like to do, um and then kind of think about those things and how they could transfer into a job regardless of your past experience.
Yes, I love it. I'm not gonna add anything to it. Yeah, that's it, most definitely. So if you have like questions for Kendall, or if you want to like learn more about her work, you can just always email me. My contact information is in the link down below, and I'll pass that information on to her. If you are interested in learning more about macro social work careers, click the link down in the episode show notes in the description box and visit macroandpaid.com. Grab my free e-course. That is the best starting point for you to learn about what are these macro social work jobs that they're talking about. It's 5 days of material where I break down everything that you need to know as far as scopes of work, job title, salary, all of the things. If you know that you are ready to work with me and you want to get deeper support in getting the macro job that you want, or to get clarity around what you should be doing, also visit macroandpaid.com and schedule a free 15-minute get to know you chat with me. That is the great way for me to learn more about your career needs and for you to learn about my services. And Kendall, I was waiting for the end of this to say, I met Kendall in a get to know you chat. And I love to bring this up to y'all because Kendall, before when I met her, like you could see the steam coming out of the top of her head. Like she was crispy. She was burnt out. Yeah. And but to see you now, Kendall, you are glowing. I love it. This is the part where I usually spend 15 minutes before we hit record, like I told you, telling people like, oh my goodness, you look so different. What did you do? Like you
Yeah, I
look
was probably like in the call.
Now you're shining and I love it. I love it. I see the difference. I'm so excited for you. I always tell you I celebrate y'all wins more than you all celebrated. You did the work. And she didn't question anything that I gave her. She did it. I didn't even know you probably had a little like hesitation, but she did it and it worked. So congratulations. Job well
Thank you. Thank you.
and so for the listeners, I'll talk to you next time. Happy macro career planning. Bye.